In the last episode, Aria's world was turned upside down as she discovered the truth about her past and her connection to the mysterious energy known as the ether. Her memories of her childhood were false implants created by the ruling elite to control her and keep her from realizing her true potential. With the truth finally revealed, Aria embarked on a perilous journey to unite the fragmented factions of the rebellion against the ruling elite. She had discovered her unique ability to their eyes locked in a silent challenge. The wounded and stunned rebels struggled to regain their footing, their cries and groans filling the air as they surveyed the devastation around them. Aria's heart raced with a mix of fear and adrenaline, her mind racing to come up with a plan to turn the tables once again. She knew Ravena wouldn't hesitate to strike, and her allies were in no shape to defend themselves. The silence between Aria and Ravena was oppressive, a heavy weight that hung over the battlefield like a guillotine's blade. Aria's fingers itched to summon the ether to unleash its fury upon her enemy and shatter the elite's grip on power. But she hesitated, her mind whispering caution. Ravena was a master strategist, and Aria knew she had to be careful not to fall into her trap. The wind picked up, whispers of the destroyed cityscape's secrets rustling through the wreckage. Aria's eyes flicked to the side, her gaze snagging on a twisted metal beam, half buried in the rubble. In a flash of insight, she knew what she had to do. With a swift flick of her wrist, Aria summoned a surge of ether energy, channeling it into the twisted metal beam. The air around her seemed to shimmer as the energy coursed through the beam, imbuing it with an otherworldly power. Ravena's eyes narrowed, her gaze fixed on Aria's hand. For a moment, the two enemies locked eyes, their minds racing with calculations and countermoves. And then, in a blur of motion, Aria flung the energized beam at Ravena. The elite leader raised a hand, her own energy flashing to meet the attack. The two forces collided, sparks flying as the ether energies clashed in a spectacular display of light and sound. The battle raged on, the two women exchanging blows in a whirlwind of power and fury. Aria's allies stumbled to their feet, their wounds forgotten in the face of the desperate fight for survival. But as the fight wore on, Aria began to tire. Ravena's powers seemed almost limitless, fueled by her own dark connection to the ether. Aria knew she had to end this and fast. Gathering her strength, she focused all her energy on a single final blast. The ether surged through her, a torrent of power that threatened to consume her. And in a flash of light, Aria unleashed the full fury of the ether. The blast struck Ravena with the force of a hurricane, sending the elite leader flying across the ruined cityscape. Aria stumbled forward, her vision blurring as the ether energy drained from her. The silence that followed was deafening, the only sound the heavy breathing of the wounded and the soft hum of the ether's aftermath. Aria's gaze locked on Ravena's crumpled form, a glimmer of hope rising in her chest. But as she took a step forward, Ravena's eyes flickered open, a cold, calculating smile spreading across her face. "You may have won this battle," Ravena hissed, her voice dripping with venom, "but the war is far from over." And with that, the darkness closed in, Ravena's words echoing in Aria's mind like a sinister promise. The air was electric with tension as Aria and Ravena faced off, their words hanging in the air like a challenge. Aria's heart raced with anticipation, her senses on high alert as she waited for Ravena to make her next move. Ravena didn't disappoint, lunging forward with a swift kick that sent Aria flying across the rubble-strewn street. Aria landed hard, the impact jarring her bones, but she sprang to her feet in an instant, her determination fueled by the ether's power. The battle raged on, the two combatants exchanging blows in a flurry of punches, kicks, and dodges. Aria's skills had improved dramatically since her training with the rebellion, but Ravena was no ordinary opponent. The elite leader's movements were calculated, precise, and deadly, each strike aimed at Aria's vulnerabilities. Aria gritted her teeth, drawing on the ether's energy to augment her strength. She launched a series of swift jabs, but Ravena countered with a vicious uppercut that sent Arya crashing to the ground. As she struggled to rise, Ravena seized the opportunity to deliver a devastating kick that sent Arya's senses reeling. The world around her began to blur, Arya's vision wavering as she stumbled to her feet. Ravena pressed her advantage, landing a flurry of quick jabs that left Arya reeling. Arya's thoughts were a jumbled mess of fear and desperation as she realized she was on the brink of defeat. Just as Ravena prepared to deliver the final blow, a faint cry echoed through the air, growing louder as a figure emerged from the wreckage. Lyra, Arya's closest friend and ally, stumbled towards them, her arm badly injured and her eyes blazing with determination. "Arya!" Lyra screamed, launching herself at Ravena. Ravena barely caught Lyra's attack, but Arya took advantage of the distraction to land a series of powerful blows that sent the elite leader stumbling back. Lyra seized the opportunity, grappling Ravena in a fierce bear hug that left both women locked in a fierce struggle. Arya took a deep breath, focusing her energy as she charged towards the pair. The ether's power surged through her, imbuing her with a fierce determination to protect her friend and turn the tide of the battle. Together, Arya and Lyra fought with renewed strength, their bond and determination forging a fierce alliance that even Ravena couldn't crack. As they battled on, the dark clouds above began to part, revealing a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The fate of the rebellion and Arya's future hung in the balance. Would she emerge victorious, or would Ravena's ruthlessness crush the last spark of resistance? The battle raged on, the outcome far from certain as Arya faced her greatest challenge, yet the air was electric with tension as Arya and Ravena circled each other, their eyes locked in a fierce stare. Arya's allies, scattered and wounded, watched in silence, their faces etched with concern and fear. The ruined cityscape stretched out behind them, a twisted backdrop of metal and debris. Ravena's squad, seemingly unharmed, closed in, forming a semicircle around Arya. Their cold, calculating eyes fixed on her, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords. Arya's determination, fueled by her fury and the ether energy coursing through her veins, never wavered. She knew this was her final stand against the ruling elite. With a deep breath, she charged forward, her fists flying in a blur of motion. Ravena laughed, a cold, mirthless sound as she countered Arya's attack with ease. The two clashed, their movements lightning fast, their blows ringing out in a deadly rhythm. Arya's allies, sensing an opportunity, began to stir, their wounds momentarily forgotten in the face of their leader's bravery. They launched a desperate attack on Ravena's squad, fighting to reach Arya's side. But Ravena's forces were too strong, too well-trained, and they soon found themselves being pushed back. Arya's vision began to blur, her energy waning, her body screaming in protest. She stumbled, her footwork faltering, and Ravena seized the moment. With a swift kick, she sent Arya crashing to the ground. As Arya struggled to rise, Ravena's boot came down, pinning her to the rubble-strewn earth. "You should have stayed hidden, Arya," Ravena repeated, her voice dripping with triumph. Arya's vision began to tunnel, her lungs burning, her heart racing. She knew she was running out of time, her strength fading, her hopes dwindling. But then, something inside her sparked, a flame of defiance that refused to be extinguished. With a snarl, Arya summoned the last remnants of her power, channeling the ether energy into a desperate bid for freedom. The air around her began to ripple, the very fabric of reality seeming to bend and warp. Ravena's eyes widened, her grip on Arya's shoulder faltering as she sensed the shift in power. Arya's allies, sensing their leader's resurgence, launched a fresh attack, their determination renewed. The battle raged on, the outcome hanging precariously in the balance. As Arya and Ravena clashed in a final, desperate bid for victory, Arya's eyes never left Ravena's as she began to circle around her, her footsteps quiet on the rubble-strewn ground. The air was heavy with tension, the silence between them thick as tar. Arya's allies, still reeling from the sudden attack, struggled to their feet, their movements slow and uncoordinated. Ravena's soldiers, however, were quick to regroup, forming a tight circle around their leader. Aria's heart sank as she counted the odds, her determination to win faltering for a moment. But then she felt the ether energy surging through her veins, a burning fire that refused to be extinguished. With a deep breath, Aria drew on that power, letting it course through her like a river of light. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, and for a moment Ravena's smile faltered. The elite leader took a step back, her eyes narrowing as she reassessed her opponent. Aria saw her chance. With a swift motion, she unsheathed her dagger, the blade flashing in the dim light. Ravena sneered, drawing her own sword, its blade gleaming with a deadly precision. The two women faced off, their weapons poised as the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The clash of blades was like music, a deadly symphony of strikes and parries. Aria's movements were fluid, her dagger slicing through the air with deadly precision. Ravena, however, was no slouch, her sword flashing with a speed and ferocity that left Aria gasping. The fight raged on, the two women dancing across the ruined landscape, their blades clashing in a blur of motion. Aria's allies, still reeling from the initial attack, stumbled forward, their movements slow and uncoordinated. Ravena's soldiers, however, were quick to respond, closing in on Aria from all sides. For a moment, Aria was trapped, her back against the wall, her dagger flashing wildly as she fought to keep her enemies at bay. But then, like a wildcat, she sprang forward, her blade slicing through the chaos, cutting down anyone who dared to stand in her way. Ravena watched her with a cold, calculating gaze, her smile growing wider with every passing moment. Aria knew that smile, knew that look. It was the look of an opponent who knew they had the upper hand. But Aria refused to back down. With a fierce cry, she launched herself at Ravena, her dagger flashing in a blur of motion. Ravena parried, her sword flashing with deadly precision, but Aria was relentless, her determination to win driving her forward. The two women clashed, their blades flashing in a deadly dance as the world around them melted into chaos. Aria's eyes never left Ravena's as she took another step forward, her senses on high alert. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the heavy breathing of the wounded and the distant hum of the machinery. Aria's allies were slowly regrouping, their faces set with determination as they prepared for the next attack. Ravena sneered, her eyes flicking to Aria's allies before returning to Aria's face. "You think they can help you?" she taunted. "They're just pawns, Aria, pawns to be used and discarded." Aria's grip on her jacket tightened, her anger simmering just below the surface. She knew Ravena was trying to get under her skin to make her lose focus. But Aria refused to take the bait. She kept her cool, her eyes locked on Ravena's as she took another step forward. The ether energy surged inside her, a burning fire that threatened to consume her. But Aria knew she had to control it, to use it to her advantage. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, a river of fire that longed to be unleashed. Ravena laughed, the sound cold and mirthless. "You think you can take me down, Aria?" she sneered. "I've been trained by the elite, I've been taught to kill." Aria smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "I've been taught to survive," she said, her voice low and deadly. The two enemies faced off, their eyes locked in a silent challenge. The air was electric with tension, the only sound the heavy breathing of the wounded and the distant hum of the machinery. And then, without warning, Ravena struck. Aria dodged the attack, her reflexes swift and deadly. But Ravena was relentless, her blows coming in quick succession. Aria parried each blow, her movements fluid and precise, but Ravena was no ordinary foe. She was a trained killer, and she would stop at nothing to take Aria down. Aria's allies rallied around her, their attacks swift and deadly, but Ravena was a force to be reckoned with, and she fought back with everything she had. The battle raged on, the two sides clashing in a desperate bid for victory. Aria's determination and skill were matched by Ravena's ruthless ambition, and it was unclear who would emerge victorious. As the fight continued, Aria began to tire. The ether energy was draining her, and she knew she couldn't keep this up for much longer. Ravena, on the other hand, seemed to be gaining strength, her blows coming in faster and more precise. Arya knew she had to end this, and fast. She focused all her energy, calling on the ether to give her the strength she needed. And then, in a burst of light and energy, Arya struck back. The blow was powerful, a blast of ether energy that sent Ravena flying across the room. Arya stood tall, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. Ravena struggled to her feet, her eyes burning with fury. "You may have won this battle," she snarled, "but the war is far from over." Arya smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "I'm ready for you," she said, her voice low and deadly. And with that, the game was on again. Arya and Ravena faced off, their eyes locked in a silent challenge. The air was electric with tension, the only sound the heavy breathing of the wounded and the distant hum of the machinery. The battle for freedom had only just begun.